guess what? I got a fever. And the only prescription is more cowbell.
This is the DWE electric drum kit, and in this video I'm going to share with you why I think it is the almost perfect electric drum kit for churches. I'm going to cover all of the pros and cons of this electric drum kit from my perspective. I'm a worship leader and a production leader. I am not a worship drummer. There are plenty of amazing reviews on YouTube from drummers, and I highly recommend checking out the eDrum Workshop channel, as they have really extensive reviews on this kit, and those reviews are for the drummers and the players. This video is for those of you who are worship leaders and production leaders like myself, who are wondering if this is going to be the right tool for your worship band. If you're new to the channel, my name's Jake Gosselin with Churchfront.com, which is your roadmap for worship and production ministry. Check out all of our resources down below this video, including links to this DW product if you want to pick it up for yourself. The number one thing I love about this drum kit is the fact that they look like they are real. After our first service using this kit, a congregation member came up to the drummer and myself. We were up here chatting, and he's like, "I am so grateful you guys went back to using an acoustic kit." But that's only half true. It is acoustic. You can swap out these mesh heads on the kit for real drum heads if you want to have an actual acoustic kit. But right now we have these mesh heads that were actually created by Roland, and Roland, of course, is known for great electric drum tech as well. And then they just have the DWE brand on them. And then inside these real acoustic shells, you have the triggering mechanism. So I love how it looks like a real drum kit, not only because of the shells being real drum shells, but also, what do you not see? Cables. There are no cables. All you see around this kit are just the drum hardware, the shells and the stands for the cymbals. No cables, and that's one of the things I can't stand about a traditional electronic drum kit, is you have all of the different cables running around your kit to get to the drum module, which then produces the sound. So what's fascinating about what they did here is you have the real shell. It's a real DW tom shell that you're looking at right here, and you've got the mesh head on top, and then inside you've got the triggering mechanism, and inside the trigger mechanism you have the little radio transmitter that's sending the data from every time you hit the drum or the rim of the drum. It sends that data to a little wireless to USB receiver at the computer running the DW SoundWorks software. That's how they got away with no wires on this kit. And the thing about the data being sent to the drum trigger software is that it's just very minimal MIDI data. You're not streaming audio or anything like that from the shell to your computer. So that means this data is ultra low latency, and it also doesn't require much power. There are batteries in all of these triggers, but these batteries should last over a year. And in the software, you'll see there's a little battery monitor that lets you know when your batteries start running low. You'll have to take off one of the heads to get to the battery compartment and get those swapped out. This is the wireless to USB receiver I was talking about. You can see that the computer running the software is very close to our drum set. That's what I would recommend if you're going to go with this setup. You don't want to be putting this receiver like somewhere on the other side of the room, even though it is rated for, I think, up to like 30 yards or something like that to receive the signals from the drum shells. I would not do that myself. I wouldn't risk it, but who knows? Maybe there's a situation at your church where you can't put this computer next to your drum set. Know that you do have some distance to work with. So it's a simple USB connection that goes into a laptop. So that's another important consideration of the setup, is you're gonna need some sort of computer to actually generate the sounds and receive the trigger signals from the shells and the cymbals. And I will say this is one of the cons of this setup for churches, the fact that you need to have a computer running the software. It's just more variables that can cause issues for volunteer drummers or whoever's using the kits. You know, at churches, we have a lot of different people using the same kit. So there's more variables that can go wrong here. Whereas if you have a drum module like the Pearl Mimic Pro or the Alesis Strike, it's usually just turn the thing on and you're ready to go. And we actually had some issues where I got a call on a Thursday night. Fortunately, I live close to the church, where they fired it up for rehearsal and they couldn't figure out how to get the drums to talk to the software and talk to the audio interface. So that's just something to consider. You make sure you have good standard operating procedures and instructions for drummers to use this type of setup. So this computer is a 15-inch MacBook Air with an M2 chip with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it has performed just fine for multiple worship services, creating the sounds from this triggering system. It actually takes 2 applications in this software to make this all possible. The first application is DWE Control. This is what is receiving the MIDI signals from the little wireless receiver that I told you about that receives signal from the cymbals and the shell triggers. So right now you can see it's on auto track. So as I tap on different shells, it automatically tracks where I'm tapping on those shells. And then this is where you can dial in all of the trigger settings to your liking. And this is gonna be important if you have drummers who are very particular about how it actually feels when you're playing the drum kit and how it triggers. So the second piece of software you're gonna need is DW Soundworks. This is where all of the samples are stored. So when I go to the settings for the Soundworks application, there are 2 important things I have to make sure are up and running. First, I need to tell it to connect to DWE Control for the MIDI device, which is the app I just showed you right here. And then you want to make sure you have the proper audio device selected for your outputs. So right now I have the Allen & Heath CQ18T. It's a little mixing console / audio interface connected to USB to this computer. And I can send up to 32 channels of audio out of this computer to that interface, or I think even a more ideal setup is if you had Dante Virtual Sound Card installed on this type of computer, then it's 1 Ethernet cable, and then you can send however many channels you would need to front of house, so long as it doesn't exceed 32 channels. So here's the mixer view of the Soundworks software. You can dive into the blend of your mix so much here. The way that I have it set up is I've got my kick and my snare on separate channels, and then I have my toms all on the same stereo output here, output 5 and 6, and then my hi-hat's on a separate output, my ride is on a separate output, and then my overhead microphones and crash cymbals, those are grouped together on another stereo output. So there's a lot of capability here in how you can mix this drum kit and send it to different buses and outputs on your interface before it even hits front of house. I would recommend in a church environment, have something similar to this. If I were mixing sound, I wanna have my kick, my snare separate on their own channels, and then I think toms, it'd be great if they could all be separate, but I'll take a stereo mix there, and then maybe if I wanna adjust the level on each of them coming from the drum set, you could do it here in the software. And then for cymbals and overheads, also fine if those are kind of blended together in a stereo output going to front of house. So lots of settings you can dive into in the Soundworks software. It is intuitive to navigate, so I'm a big fan of that. And I honestly haven't spent hours in it dialing things in. I'm just speaking again from a worship pastor or tech director who has to quickly get these things up and running, explain it to my drummer of kind of the basics of it, and then I like to let them dive into it more deeply because they're the ones who should and can care more about these things. Another important factor to consider about this drum kit is how does it actually sound, right? That's probably the most important factor. Coming from a brand like DW, one can expect it's gonna sound amazing, and I can tell you it does. Again, this is gonna be a place where if you're a worship drummer, you might be way more particular about the type of drum samples that you're gonna be working with and producing from the software. But speaking as a front of house mix engineer and a worship leader, I think they sound great. I think there's a lot you can do with the samples and the libraries that come preloaded in this kit. Rather than me testing out these samples for you here, I just wanna play back a portion of one of our worship services where I was leading worship, and we multi-tracked this drum set so you can hear for yourself what this sounds like in the context of a worship set. But keep in mind, you can go into the kit designer here in the software, and maybe you start with one of their standard kits, but then you can kind of mix and match different shells and cymbals to your liking. So let's go ahead and roll some of that footage. one idea I had when I was thinking about this setup is for the computer running DW SoundWorks, maybe you could get like a really compact PC that has the appropriate specs on it and has like a touch screen attached to it. That could be kind of a cool experience for a drummer to be able to just have a touch screen to work with instead of having to like type on the keyboard and reach down here. So just one idea. Don't take it as you have to go do that, but just throwing it out there for you. So here is the deal breaker for me on this drum kit, specifically in a church context. It is the cymbals. They're too loud. I love how the cymbals look great. They look like they're real cymbals, and they have all the wireless technology built into them. I understand they probably had to pack more components in there to make that possible. But DW, all you need to do to make this drum kit ready for a church context like this is just make these rubber cymbals. And yes, I know, I don't like the feel of rubber cymbals. I'm not even a drummer. Drummers don't like the feel of rubber cymbals. But this kit made me appreciate why electric kits need rubber cymbals. Because the whole point of an electric kit, especially in a church environment, is we're trying to reduce stage volume down to almost zero. Here at Rock Harbor Church especially, we have a traditional style building. It has a very live sound to it. We've even treated it with a ton of acoustic panels, which have helped. But when you have an instrument that produces a lot of sound at the source, that just becomes an issue for balancing it with the rest of our band. And I've used metal cymbals before. We have metal cymbals, the field cymbals at South Fellowship Church. Something about the way those cymbals are designed, they are not nearly as loud as these ones. And maybe DW could like acquire Field or something like that and then use those as cymbals for this kit, because that would be great. The Field cymbals do create noise, but not as much as this. I feel like even when I tap this, like I'm barely tapping the cymbal. Like that sound just like cuts through the whole room. So then you can imagine as a drummer is playing, aggressively, it literally, I just think of the cowbell skit from SNL every time I hear these things being hit. That applies to the hi-hat. That is a deal breaker for us for using this kit in a worship environment. And to be honest, I don't really know of any environments where that would actually work, because I feel like the whole point, again, of electric drums is to keep the stage volume as low as possible. And if you're trying to use this kit to like practice at home, the cymbals would still be very bothersome to your neighbors or to your family members in other rooms. Maybe the cymbal issue isn't going to be a big deal if you're a church with a large stage and a large auditorium. In your PA, you are running it loud enough so that nobody's going to hear these very loud cymbals. But even when I was just worshiping at our church, I came and I sat in the congregation. It wasn't blatantly obvious that you could hear the attack on these cymbals, but even as a congregant, like with a little bit of intentional listening, I'm like, yeah, those cymbals are too loud. The samples sounded great coming through the PA, but they were almost overwhelmed by the sound of the striking of the cymbal here at the drum kit. At our church, we average about 90 to 95 decibels with the C weighting, so it's not super quiet. There's a lot of churches that run quieter than that, and then there's some churches that are pushing 100 decibels. But even if you're pushing 100 decibels out your PA, I think you're still gonna have an issue with the sound coming from these cymbals. So DW, I would highly, highly recommend, if this is gonna be perfect for churches, please make these rubber cymbals. Well, I hope you guys found this review helpful. Thank you so much, DW, for sending me the kit to try out. I do have to send it back to them, and DW really did just want me to give my honest take on this kit. The video was not sponsored, and I gave you guys my honest take, is I love it. I love how it looks amazing. I love the wireless technology. It feels great for our drummers, but the big issue, and it's a big one in my perspective, is these cymbals. I highly recommend checking out the YouTube channel Electric Drum Workshop. He has amazing in-depth videos on this kit. So especially if you're a worship drummer, you're gonna appreciate the details that he covers that I did not cover here. But if you found this video helpful, leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we're gonna continue to review drums for specifically a church context. And hopefully we can help you make better informed decisions on what's gonna work best at your church. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.